His Eminence Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke regrets that he is unable to attend our Conference of Catholic Families here today. However, he recorded the following interview for us in May of this year. Cardinal Burke was asked 3 questions. Cardinal Burke, can you tell us about your own background, what it was and your parents that left such a profound influence on you for the future, and were there any others that influenced you and helped you to stay on track, that this might also strengthen those coming up after you? You have shown us that you are willing to cling to Christ at whatever cost, and please God, we will all be helped by your example.
I was blessed to have very good parents. My father was born and raised a Catholic. His father was the first generation from Ireland, and his mother had come directly from Ireland and married my grandfather, and they had married somewhat late in life, and so they just had the 2 children, my father and then his sister Agnes. And my mother was born and raised in a family of American Baptists, but at the time that she was courting my father was courting her, I should say, and then they decided to marry. She took instructions in the Catholic faith from Father Bernard McKevitt, who was the parish priest there in the home parish at Richland Center, Wisconsin. And she often said throughout her life, he gave such a wonderful explanation of the faith that she simply came to realize that her Baptist faith was incomplete and that the Catholic faith completed it. And I remember as children, we were surprised to know that she was a convert, because she was so fervent in her Catholic faith and insisted so much with us on knowing our faith and living it. At home, there was the connection with the parish, especially with Sunday Mass and with regular confession on Saturday. Simply, I would say, was the high point of the life of our home. This was everything centered around Sunday Mass and then preparation for it with by a regular confession on Saturday afternoon. Our parents so formed us in that central mystery of our faith, which is Christ's encounter with us in the sacraments, that remains today such a strong impression in me from my childhood. And then along with that, we had the Baltimore Catechism, which was a wonderful tool, and our parents were encouraging us to learn the Catechism, and then coupled with their efforts to teach us the faith, to answer our questions. We had a wonderful parish priest, Father Owen Mitchell. It seems like everything was coming from Ireland, but he also was a native of Ireland who had come to be a priest in the United States. He was a wonderful teacher of the faith. And then we had the Catholic school, and the sisters in the Catholic school, of course, they taught us all of the subjects, but they, in a particular way, there was a strong emphasis on the catechism. So I was also raised with a deep knowledge of the faith, and with a sense that the faith is about so many wonderful mysteries that we must spend really a lifetime coming to know them more deeply, that we never know them completely. There was instilled in me a wonder at God's presence in my life, in the life of my family, and in the world. And finally, at home, there was a strong sense that one's way of thinking and speaking and acting could only be coherent with what we believe, and with the presence of Christ in our lives from Sunday Mass. But this was also symbolized in our home by the enthronement of the image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and also by a strong devotion to his Virgin Mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And my parents were they were loving parents, but they were very strict. And for instance, if we were to use inappropriate language or to act in a way that was not just and loving with others, they corrected us, and they showed us the importance of getting on the right track, to use your term, from the very beginning in order to be prepared for a whole lifetime. And I have to say, I'm now going to be 70 years old in June, and I think more and more, and this has been true for years, I think more and more of the lessons that I learned at home and how important they are. Now, I also was blessed to go to the minor seminary at the age of 14. My diocese, the Diocese of La Crosse, had a minor seminary. We had a wonderful group of priests who were in charge of the seminary, and they too continued in this same emphasis on the beautiful liturgy that we had in the seminary. The praying publicly of the Rosary and the other formal prayers that we said, regular confession, and then a strong emphasis on the knowledge of our faith, and to be able to respond to the many questions that people in the world have about the faith. And so that was also a tremendous gift for me. What happened then in my life, I entered the seminary in 1962. I was born in 1948. But in the mid to late 60s, the great turmoil set in the church. And I remember also in the seminaries, I should say, which I attended in those years, there was tremendous turmoil. And many young men left the seminary. Some became very confused by the strange ideas that were going about, strange ideas with regard to both faith and morals. There was a tremendous turmoil, and people often say to me, well, why did you stay in the seminary when so many were leaving, or how did you remain with this very solid Catholic foundation when there were so many forces against it? And I think about it often enough, and I believe in a very particular way that it was thanks to my home, to my parents, and to those early educators, both the priests in my parish, the sisters who taught in the Catholic school. There also were some lay teachers in the later years, and then the seminary, the minor seminary, which was a most positive experience for me in terms of the life of faith, and I can't be thankful enough. I wanted to mention one other aspect of what kept me on track, which also has to do with the family, and that is that there were a number of other very good men in the seminary who became friends, and we very much encouraged one another to grow in the virtues that would be necessary for a priest to grow in the virtues to be a good Christian. And in every case, those good friends that I had, I came to know their families, and I saw the same reality, namely good parents raising their children in a holy way with love, but also with a love that had substance. In other words, a love that made demands on us in order to be true love, and not simply some kind of sentiment, but rather a selfless and a pure way of relating to God and to one another. And so that's a somewhat brief account. I could write volumes on it. I might mention one other feature which my life is that when I was 7 years old, my father became very sick with a brain tumor, and he died when I was 8 years old. But even in that brief period of time that I knew him, the faith was the greatest gift which he gave to me. And I just relate one story which I've told also in other places. When he was in the final stages of his illness and he was staying at home, the parish priest, Father Owen Mitchell, would come to our home to hear my father's confession and to bring him Holy Communion. And this happened regularly. This was in all the sadness of my father's illness, and we knew he was dying. We knew that short of a miracle, he wouldn't get better. These visits of the priest were very happy moments and unforgettable. In those days, when the priest came to bring Holy Communion, of course, he came with a cassock and surplice. We met him at the door of the house with a lighted candle, a little procession into my father's bedroom where he was confined to bed. Then we would leave the room while the priest heard his confession, and then when the confession was over, we would return to assist as the priest gave him Holy Communion. But it will never leave my mind the importance of that arrival of Christ himself in our home at a very difficult time for my father especially, and how much this meant to my father, that this was really what sustained him until our Lord called him to himself. And so it always strikes me how if we remain true to our faith, and if we live our faith, especially in these critical moments, in a heartfelt way, God, even in those sufferings, brings so many blessings to us. And I often think that my father's illness had a great deal to do with my hearing God's call to the holy priesthood. And another point I would make here, and I think it's important to keep in mind, is that even though my father died when I was 8 years old, I've had a sense of his spiritual presence throughout my life. And what he had done in forming the home, I'm the youngest of 6 children, what he had done in forming our home together with my mother really, in an heroic way, continued. And so it was, and she always said she never married again. She always said that that was her whole life, the home that she had made with my father, and that she just couldn't think to marry again. But she continued in that same way, and above all, the importance of the Catholic faith and living the Catholic faith. I would say also one other thing, I'm adding many things now, but I think it's important to note the role of siblings, of brothers and sisters also in this growth in the faith. And I think parents too, with each child, as they impart to that child a strong sense of prayer, of belief, and of good Christian conduct, that also is a gift to all the children. And I was the youngest, and so in a certain way I had these older brothers and sisters who were like little parents to me, and so I received a special measure, I would say, of Christian formation, because they were well formed, and they of course expected me to think and act in a way too that was truly Catholic in the best sense of the word. And all of this, I have to say, has been most liberating. It's given me a great joy and a great freedom of living, the freedom which comes from having a discipline in one's life, of having develop strongly the gift of faith that God gives to us at baptism, and then living that faith. That is the most important gift that I've had, and it's that I wouldn't exchange for anything.